You know, this film is really, really important to see in the theatre. You know, we are filming in an IMAX ratio, and it's very important to make sure that the audience sees this as large as they possibly can and in IMAX, because the world that takes place at the top and the bottom of frame is almost as important as what takes place left and right. In fact, it's probably as important because it's showing sort of these confined spaces that Grace is in. So it's also helping show the scale and the grandeur and the grandness of the space that they're inhabiting. So it's very important that this film gets seen as large as possible. Our initial conversations were rather broad for the look of this film. You know, we talked about the fact that this film needed to be light. This film needed to be light-hearted, but also deep and emotional. You know, we talked about the fact that there are other space films that have been made in the past that have been extraordinarily good, so we needed to find a space and a place that this film existed. We talked about the ability to keep the character central and the characters central. We talked about the ability to make sure that the characters sort of had a really good interaction with each other and were able to kind of become incredibly intimate with each other. The challenges of shooting inside the ship were immense. You know, shooting in small spaces is always tricky, but then trying to do it with, you know, 35, 40 crew people all around was incredibly hard, incredibly challenging. You know, trying to make sure that we were able to find angles on this that showed the small spaces, but didn't make the audience feel too claustrophobic was the biggest challenge. Ryan Gosling, I must say, this is my first time working with Ryan, and he is a pleasure to work with. I mean, he's incredibly funny, but he's also got incredible humanity, and his characterization of Grace is very, very warm. You know, it's the camera really enjoys being close on Grace. You know, that it's important that we show Grace in his space, but it's also really important the camera kind of shows him close up, because I think most of this film, a lot of this film plays in his head and his eyes, and so, you know, an actor like Ryan has incredible eyes to do close-ups on. I've known Phil and Chris for quite a few years. I've never had the chance to work with them. So when this film came up to do, I knew it was exactly the film that I wanted to do with them. Now, I love the way they both think. They're very non-literal filmmakers, and they think very much like in the world of animation, where anything's possible, and the constraints of normal filmmaking don't necessarily apply. And so as somebody that sort of makes films for a living, like films for a living, I'm very much constrained by the reality of gravity, by the reality of what's able to be recorded on film and not through a lens. And they generally push me into a world where I'm able to kind of step outside that box to think quite laterally and push the boundaries of what I'm making.